Okay, very good afternoon, guys. So, in the morning session, we outline session for this lesson. The outline itself, I've discussed a little extra than the outline, but still, it's just an outline session. Okay, so this session is, it's a brief account. So we'll be discussing briefly about this entire chapter. And the third type of video I will be releasing part by part. I will try to explain each topic wise. So please do join. Yeah, we'll wait for one minute. We'll see whoever joins and then we will start. So I will be sharing the link of morning quick outline class. Okay, so it's around 35 minutes will be there. So that's a comprehensive, that's a quick outline class, and this is brief session. Outline is here. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, then we'll start. Maybe because of the weekend, guys are busy with something or the other. Anyways, you can access this video at any point of time. So let's start the brief discussion on this chapter, and let's utilize this time to learn more about the important topics which we cover in this lesson. So this chapter is belongs to unit 1 of 11th standard biology, CBSE. It's an NCERT syllabus, and which is which will be useful for both NEET and academics, right? So when we talk within this unit, that is diversity in the living world, the first chapter is this, that is the living world. So in this living world, we'll be discussing about the important aspects of the living, features of the living, or the characteristics of the living. That is very important that you need to understand. So the questions look simple. That what is living means, it might be a very you may think that the question belongs to maybe a 6th standard student or so. Yeah, they have, at that standard they have their own definitions, right? In the sense, the definitions would be restricted to that standard. When we talk about this 11th or 12th standard, we have to go beyond what exactly the living is. So we have to define this living, right? What exactly this living, right? What makes an organism living, that we need to discuss. So we need to understand more about it. Yeah, good afternoon, Ritika. Yeah. So in this, what we can start with is, we have to understand the definition of the living, right? So just a minute. So let's move into the important aspects of this lesson. So we'll start with the characteristics of living. So first we need to define the living, what is living, etc. Right? When we talk about characteristics, we have different types of characteristics that makes a thing living. So that distinguish, or that is that what makes actually a living a living. It means it can be separated from non-living. So what are the attributes, what are the characteristics that does this living organisms would have, that we need to discuss well about it. So be it when we talk about living, right, so we talk about different types of organisms, living forms, their diversity, right? But before we talk about the diversity, etc., we need to know what makes certain organism as living, right? So be it it's a single cellular organism or multicellular organism, whatever the size is or whatever the number of cells is, so they have to follow or they have to possess these following characteristics. So when we talk about the characteristics of living, so we have different types of set of characteristics that those were given in NCERT text. So if you have NCERT text in front of you, or if you are accessing the NCERT text, or if you are new to this 11th standard syllabus, you can download this NCERT PDFs. Saran Raghu, good afternoon. So you can download this PDFs, right? I'll be providing a link over there. So you can download this 11th standard NCERT PDF, and you can go through the lessons. Yeah, I will be pasting that link. So in this, you'll be I provided the link. So if you click on the the images, you will be redirected to download page. Okay, so you can make use of it. Whoever doesn't have NCERT textbooks right now, it means the one who freshly started 11th standard, they may not possess this, right? So you can make use of this link, right? So now let's discuss about characteristics of living beings. So when we talk about the characteristics of living beings, we have almost six different characteristics, six to seven or six different characteristics we have. So those characteristics makes when these characters are present in an organism, that makes it a living being. So what are those? If you see that in morning session also I have already discussed, but let's dig deeper. So here we will be talking about adaptations. We'll be having important characteristics of metabolisms. So few of these characters are not completely covered in NCERT, but that's why I'm covering the extra points as well. So thermoregulation. So regulation of temperature according to the environment, right? At the same time, cellular organization. So the arrangement or composition of the cells in a body, cellular organization, thermoregulation, growth aspects. So what are the growth aspects? So how does this grow, right? What are the growth aspects in the case of mass or in terms of number? Growth. Metabolism, we'll be talking about metabolism. Metabolism, we have both formation reactions and breaking down reactions, both anabolism and catabolism. We'll talk about examples also, and then we'll talk about adaptations, and then consciousness. So we are self-aware. If humans are concerned, right, we have this self-consciousness, right? So this consciousness is one of the important characteristic that humans possess, right? So that's make it one of the important characteristic, right, where we are self-aware. So when we talk about consciousness, right, we are it's a defining property, right? This consciousness is a defining property, especially it is self-consciousness you will be observing in humans. So we are self-aware of many things, and we are aware that we are learning. So we have cognition, we have metacognition. It means that thinking of thoughts itself, thought process. So how I think, how I act on it, the way we think, the way we actually use our thought process. So these are all comes under metacognition. At the same time, we are self-aware beings. So these are the 6 7 types of characteristics we see in which makes a living being. So let's address one by one. So more importantly, if you see, this metabolism plays a major role, because all living organisms, if you see any chemical reaction that takes place in the living organisms, is based upon enzymes. So enzymes would, if you see in the biomolecules lesson, right? So in biomolecules, we'll be dealing with different types of enzyme, classification of enzymes, right? Like, hydrolyzes or transferases, or you have reductases, oxidases, right? There are different sort of enzymes which actually carry out some reactions, right? So uh, this metabolism is something, right, is a series of chemical reaction. So one leads to one, leads to one, leads to other, and that too, their interconnected pathways also will be formed. So if you see that one of the pathways intermediate can be a substrate for other pathway, or one of the end product might be a substrate for other pathway, right? Or a fresh substrate would be utilized for the formation of new complex molecule. So likewise, when we talk about metabolism is one of the important living aspect, right? So when we talk about metabolism, we can slow down the metabolism by putting in storage, what do you say, low temperatures. For example, in biomolecules, we studied about the enzyme functions based upon the temperature, pH, etc. So we can reduce or we can slow down the metabolic processes or enzymatic reactions, but not completely ceasing it. But when the metabolism is completely seized off, so that's what we learn in biomolecules again. So it is, this chapter is something, the metabolism is connected with the biomolecules. So what we talk in that biomolecules, it every time this the system tries to attain equilibrium, but never gets it equilibrium. So during this metabolic process, what happens is, so these are all series of reactions that keep on occurring, right? So you'll be finding different byproducts, end products, and the products. So when we talk about this metabolism, we have different types of metabolism also. We have both anabolism and catabolism. That is, both formation and breaking. And sometimes there is a third type that we can see that both in a one metabolism, both formation will be there at the same time. Breaking down also will be present. So, but in general, we have anabolism and catabolism. When we talk about catabolism, we can take an example of complex molecules are actually broken down into simple usable forms, right? So when these complex molecules are allowed in this, when they are metabolizing, right? Maybe probably oxidation. So they will be you know turned to be simpler molecules. They will be broken down into simpler forms. That you can take one of the example, that is respiration, as uh, one of the catabolic process, right? And then when it comes to anabolism is something in which, can you give example for anabolic process? Any one anabolic process? Anabolism. So viewers who are watching right now, you can type it in comment section. I mean, in uh, live chat, examples of anabolic pathways or anabolic metabolism. Yeah. Is my voice audible? That are you able to follow? So, example of any anabolic pathway or anabolic reaction or metabolism whatsoever. Okay, you can pause here and you can go back, check, and you can come back. Okay, now let's move on. That this anabolic pathways, we can take one of the examples, photosynthesis, right? So photosynthesis is if you see this, it's a yeah, yeah, correct, Amrita. So when we talk about photosynthesis, is one of the important anabolic process where it is formation reaction, growth. Okay, so you're talking about metabolism. How does growth comes in that, Kritika? Formation reactions, we are talking about enzymatic reactions which forms complex molecules by using simpler molecules. Anabolism, formation reactions. So photosynthesis can be one of the example we can use where this process, in this process, formation of complex organic molecules would be seen. So if you see this photosynthesis reaction or photosynthesis equation, you would have got very clearly that this inorganic compounds would be used. Enzymatically, they will be converted into organic molecule, right? Which is a energy rich. The glucose, and that glucose is eventually again enter into different pathway, right? It can be catabolized, right, during the cellular respiration and can produce energy, right? Energy currency, that is ATP. So that's how this anabolism, catabolism are very much important when it comes to living beings. So this is one of the important characteristic. And the second one is growth. So growth is one of the example or one of the characteristic of the living beings. So when we talk about growth, we can talk about in the terms of number, right? Or in the case of mass, right? So if you see the plant growth or any protozoal growth, right? Maybe the mass would be increasing or the number of the cells also would be increasing. So or this ability to grow is one of the important life characteristic, right? So this is one of the important life characteristic that the living organisms grow with increase in mass and number of individuals, whether the number of individuals will grow or the cells, right? So when we talk about the individuals in the sense like the unicellular organisms, if you see, right, at a time they form this spore kind of a thing and they undergo repeated mitosis and suddenly they burst and they will be releasing many offsprings. So it depends on the organism and the type of reproduction. So here the growth is something which is concerned on the number of the individual, at the same time mass of the individual. So we have talked about two things. And the third one is thermoregulation. Thermoregulation. Just like we have got fan regulators that, right, we can increase the speed or decrease the speed, right? In that way, we have got thermoregulators. So, which brings the system homeostatic. Right? Homeostasis is maintained by this thermoregulation, osmoregulation, etc. So, when we talk about thermoregulation, which is a process which allows our body to maintain its core internal temperature. So if it is based, if these organisms, if we take examples of conformers, the core internal temperature changes along with the external temperature, right? But when it comes to regulators like us, where we invest lot of energy to actually regulate this body temperature. So see, if you see all these characteristics, these are all somewhat connected to the chapter 13th of the 12th standard biology, that is organisms and population. So we talk about this thermoregulation, we talk about this homeostasis, at the same we talk about adaptations, we talk about regulators, conformers. So that's how we can connect two important topics. Okay, so this is how one of the important trait or one of the important characteristic of living is the thermoregulation or maintaining homeostasis. So the core internal temperature would be maintained based upon the type of the organism, maybe a conformer or maybe a regulator or partial regulator, right? So this is the third one. The fourth one is cellular organization. So when it comes to cellular organization, so when it comes to cellular organization, so we have a type of arrangement. So cells would go by mitosis, right? The somatic cells, and they can be based upon the organism. That can be a unicellular or that can be a multicellular. So if it is a multicellular, the arrangement is very much essential. How they are arranged, right? The arrangement of the cells, right? The multiple, especially the multicellular organisms, right? So how this organization is seen in multicellular and unicellular organisms and their examples. At the same time, what exactly the cellular organization speaks about is nothing but composition and arrangement of cells in the body. So when we talk about this cellular organization, we will talk about its composition. What type of cells, how they behave, the composition. At the same time, how do they arranged? Whether they arrange in a single layer or double layer or multiple layers, right? So different types of arrangement we will talk about. So like that, we can pick different examples of multicellular organisms that right from the lower organisms, lower invertebrates to the higher vertebrates also we can speak. And when we talk about unicellular organisms, we can talk about prokaryotic archibacteria, prokaryotic to eukaryotic single cell organisms. So this is third aspect, right? And the fourth aspect we will be talking about is reproduction. So when we talk about reproduction, is one of the important characteristic of living, right? And in NCERT they covered this topic quite extensively. It means they gave different examples and they talked about this reproduction. In terms of even exceptional cases also they talked, right? Not it means that. So if an organism is not able to reproduce, it doesn't mean that it is not anymore living or non-living. So we are not inclusively taking up this reproduction to define living characteristics. But in general, those are all exceptions, like the infertile, sterile mule and some infertile couples. It doesn't mean that they are not living. So when it comes to this reproduction, there are some certain exceptions, right? So even in this reproduction, we have different types of reproduction. Especially, we'll cover this reproduction. We already covered this reproduction in organisms in 12th standard. First two chapters we extensively covered about this. Please have a look at those videos as well. So we have got budding, we have got asexual mode of reproduction and sexual mode of reproduction, and how essential this reproduction is also we have been discussing. So this reproduction allows allows organisms to perpetuate their line or their species. So that is one of the aspect. At the same time, these numbers would be kept on constant or increasing and they will be replacing the existing old or the dead ones. Right? When we talk about mortality, natality, so how this reproduction is very much important, right? So if a cell or an organism is able to reproduce either by sexual or asexual mode, right, it is able to we can call it as a living. That's what when we talk about this virus, right? So virus is something, a connecting link. When in the evolutionary perspective, virus is the connecting link between non-living and living, because it is an obligatory. When there is a living host is there, it is able to reproduce itself. It is able to replicate itself. And one virus enters, and there are thousands of virus comes from a living host. But once outside the living host, what happens? It's just a particle without any metabolism, without any sort of reactions. As simple as that. So this is the aspect of reproduction. Ma, are you able to follow? Or yeah, protein synthesis and DNA replication, animal replication. Okay. Are you able to follow? So meanwhile, in between, I'm checking whether you're following or not, or whether my voice is audible, whether it is buffering or not. So please let me know. Okay, I hope you guys are following. Okay, let's move on. Or is there any lag? Okay, fine. So let's move on. That is what is it? Adaptations. So we right now we talked about metabolism, we talked about thermoregulation, we talked about cellular organization, we talked about reproduction. Now we are talking about consciousness. So when we talk about consciousness, right? Even in NCERT also they covered it. When it comes to consciousness, they for example, uh, consciousness is something which we are the organism is able to interact with its environment, at the same time showing some irritability, some response to it, right? At the same time, now when we talk about the other than humans, right, that irritability or the response to stimuli is shown by certain organisms, like photoperiodic effects also been seen seasonally, seasonal variation, etc. But when at the same time chemotaxis, phototaxis, etc., based upon the external environment like light, water, temperature, etc., the showing irritability. But when it comes to human, it's something a unique character that human has, that is nothing but self-consciousness. So self-awareness is given to the, or it is seen in human beings, which is one of the important aspect that human has. So when we talk about this consciousness, it is an ability of an organism to sense its environment, right? But self-consciousness is given, it is seen in human beings only. So remaining thing, the response to stimuli, etc., is seen in other organisms as well. At the same time, they show some irritability. It means it is an ability of an organism to react to the external environment or external stimuli. So there is a sudden increase in temperature, sudden drop in temperature, sudden increase in salinity, sudden increase in you know what do you say, light is dark, or it's too bright. So considering different abiotic factors, how these living organisms are able to respond, that is what we call it as irritability. So this irritability is shown when organism has this consciousness. In the sense, this irritability comes under this consciousness, which is one of the characteristic of living, right? But when it comes to self-consciousness, human being has self-consciousness. So the last one is adaptations. So when we talk about adaptations, right? So when we talk about adaptations, so in organisms and population of 12th standard biology, we already discussed how organisms do adapt to harsh environments. So if there is an increased heat outside, so whether they are plants or animals, so how do they actually respond to short term? So these adaptations we can actually differentiate into short term and long term adaptation. So short term seasonal variation, how these glands or spores formation, or how they undergo these organisms undergo winter sleep or summer sleep, this hibernation and estivation. This comes under short term adaptation. So these adaptations are shown by these living beings. So this is one of the important characteristics. And coming to the next one is long term adaptations. There is a permanent changes in response to the changing environment. So there is a permanent, there is a changing environment, and to that there is a permanent, permanent response or permanent changes towards the response of the changing environment. So that makes it long-term adaptation. So these adaptations: metabolism, thermoregulation, cellular organization, reproduction, consciousness, and growth aspects, which makes the living beings. So these are the different characteristics that we are discussed so far. I hope this is clear. And moving to the next aspect, right? So that is the diversity. When we talk about diversity, so diversity is created. How this diversity is created, we already knew about it. So when we talk about single cell, primitive cells, to the different life forms, now we are observing different animals, different plants, humans, right? Birds we have seen, and insects, class insect. So we have a variety of insects, right? So these are all makes this entire variety we can call it as biodiversity. So within this biosphere, the whole biosphere, huge biosphere, nothing but Earth has consists different type of biodiversity. Biodiversity is nothing but how we define this biodiversity for that matter. So biodiversity is nothing but it's a degree of variability among living organisms. So how one organism is varying with the other organism. So how this variability is there among the organisms, to what extent? So that is called biodiversity. So it includes all the varieties of plants, animals, right? And it even you know it is a key for this ecological studies, like, or even ecosystem formation of ecosystem communities, and even at the level of species diversity, at the level of even genetic diversity. So when we talk about biodiversity class, that is called standard. So we talked about diversity at different levels. We talked about the diversity at the genetic level. We talked about the diversity at the species level, community level, and at the ecosystem level also. Right? This makes biodiversity. Right? So now, if you want to study these organisms, right? So there are n number, millions of plants and animals are there in the world. So this if you want to from one area to other area, there are n number of plants. So if I calling this name in my vernacular language or the local names, right, so it would create a lot of confusions, and we can not everyone can follow, right, the language. So to end that language barrier, or for the scientific studies, at the same time, for better access of this entire biodiversity, we come up with an approach called systematics, in which it allows to study the biodiversity. So in systematics, in the name itself, it is there. So systematics is something which is categorizing, or systematically arranging, right? So it tries to attempts to classify the diversity of organisms on the basis of three different factors. One is identification, one is classification, one is nomenclature. So these are the three different aspects that actually the systematics would cover. So based upon using these three tools, right, three fields, we can really study the biodiversity without any confusion. So first, what we have to do is we need to identify. So the first field we are talking about is identification. So what is it? What is an identification? Identification is it aims to identify correct name and position of an organism. So we need to identify the organism. For example, if you go to Amazon forests, or you go to deep ocean dives. So one of my friend worked in marine biology. So he used to collect samples from the ocean, right? So when they do the type studies, whether the organism they actually observe whether already existing or not existing, we will be comparing with already existing, data, right? So how can we really identify them? By using key. So here we are using a concept called key. A key, KEY. K is nothing but, it's a list of alternative characteristics found in an organism. So based upon this list, we will be identifying organisms. And then comes to the classification. So in the classification, we classify the organisms, or we arrange these organisms in a hierarchical manner. So based upon different taxas. So basic unit would be species, and the higher unit would be kingdom. So we'll be placing similar organisms which breed among themselves, right? So we put in species, and the similar species put together in genus, like the family, order, class, phylum, and kingdom. So when we talk about this classification can be further divided into two types. One is plant classification and animal classification. It means the difference is that at the phylum level, we will say next to the kingdom, phylum will be there in the case of the taxon. Phylum will be in the case of animal classification, or in the plant classification, we use division as a classifying taxon. So like this, we use the second field to study various organisms and to keep them in taxa, so that we can really uh, access that information. We can really better study those organisms or the biodiversity, right? So when we talk about the next tool is that is nomenclature. So whoever attended the morning session, it would be little repeating, but reminding contents. I am actually what are the important contents I'm trying to discuss in depth. Okay, so if you find it repeating, few more topics with a, with which in this video I'll be spending much more time on important topics as well. So there will be a difference from the morning video to right now what I'm discussing, right? Okay, so next, when we talk about this nomenclature, so nomenclature in the name itself is there. It's a naming, right? After we identify and then classify, right? So after this classification of organisms, we will be subjected this organism for the naming nomenclature, right? So like how we have the first name and second name and surname, etc. So why we all have names for better identification, right? So nomenclature, when we follow the binomial nomenclature, which was introduced by Carlos Linnaeus, and the Linnaeus system of class, this nomenclature follows the binomial nomenclature, in the sense like you'll be having genus and species name. Genus name, the first letter always starts with the capital letter, and then the species name would always start with the small letter. So whenever you're writing an exam in academics or any other writing paper or writing any sort of scientific articles, you need to make sure that you need to these scientific names in italics. Okay, so that's how we write. So when we talk about Mangifera indica, right, the indica species name should be starting with the small letter, right? This is how we follow, nomenclature for almost any organism or any other classification, right? So this is binomial nomenclature. At the same time, we have got polynomial system of nomenclature also. So polynomial system of nomenclature is something which contain more than two words. Maybe if you take this Indian crow, right, Corvus splendens splendus, Corvus splendus splendus, right? So there are three words are there actually. So this makes this trinomial system, right? So these three words within this trinomial system, right? it resembles the three words. First one is genus, species, and subspecies. So in the binomial nomenclature, we only talk about the genus and the species, but in trinomial nomenclature, we talk about the genus, species, and subspecies. Okay. Example: Indian crow. You can type and you can see. We put it as Corvus. What do you say? Splendens, splendens. Okay. So I'll put that example here. Corvus splendens, splendens. You can see the example. Corvus splendens, splendens. Yeah, let's move further. So morning we didn't discuss about this in depth of nomenclature. So we are now talking about the polynomial nomenclature and its trinomial nomenclature and its examples. Also we discussed. Now when we talk about the biological nomenclature, we follow certain codes also, right? Like we have five different codes we follow. That is ICBN, ICZN, ICVN, ICNB, and ICNCP. It means International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, International Code for Geological Nomenclature, International Code for Viral Nomenclature, International Code for Nomenclature of Bacteria, International Code for Nomenclature for Cultivated Plants. So these are the different codes we use for the nomenclature purpose. Right? So when we talk about the next aspect, that is types of specifications in nomenclature. So what do we talk about the specifications? What it needs to contain when we talk about this specifications? What exactly this nomenclature should contain? I will give this specifications also. When we talk about the specification, so these are the requirements for a nomenclature. So what are the requirements we need? So specific requirements. So this ICBM, the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, recognize these. Now what I am going to discuss. These several types were what I am going to discuss right now are very essential, or they are actually you know uh, precise requirement. So these are the requirements we need to have it when we talk about or when we go for nomenclature. So what are the specifications in nomenclature? So we have different or several types of specifications involved in this nomenclature. So what are those? So these things are not covered in NCERT. So for the need purpose, we have to refer other books or the material I will provide also, that is enough. And now I'm discussing, right? So make use of it. So in this specifications, we have holotype, syntype, paratype, lectotype, and neotype and isotype. So these are the specifications we see in nomenclature. So what are this actually? So holotype, or which in which it is a mode of nomenclature, right? So on what basis or what are the requirements of nomenclature we are discussing? So in the holotype, what we do is this prototype specimen from which description of a new species is established. It means we use this prototype specimens. This prototype specimen should be used where we will be we will be establishing the new species. It means when we talk about different aspects of the herbarium, when we talk about herbarium, or when we talk about identification. So what we do is we will give a short description at one end, right, at the bottom of the herbarium, right? So in that description, we can identify or we can establish as a new species based upon the specimens that we collect. So prototype specimens. These specifications are very confusing, and they are all closely look very similar. So please do follow, right? If you are unable to get everything at once, you can pause this video, right? And then you can recap, and then you can see. Is that clear? So when we talk about the specifications of nomenclature, we have holotype, syntype, paratype, lectotype, neotype, and isotype. So within this holotype, what is holotype actually? So holotype, which uses prototype specimens for the nomenclature or establishment of new species. Syntype is something which any of the two or more specimens cited by an author, right? When there is no holotype, so when there is no prototype specimen is not available, right? When there is a prototype specimen is not available, right? What can we what how can we proceed in the nomenclature? So then what we can do is uh, any of the two or more specimens cited by an author when there is a no holotype. When there is no holotype, that is prototype specimen is not there, right? So when there is an absence of in absence of holotype, some author can actually cite these specimens, two or more specimens, so that based upon it we can go for nomenclature. So that is one way, one approach we can go. So this type of one of the specification, we call it as syntype. So there is a paratype. Paratypes is something which is specimens described along with the holotype. So there is a prototype specimen, and the specimens will be described along with the holotype. So these are something combination, holotype and paratype, which are depending upon the specimens available. In that way we can go for nomenclature. And then next aspect is lectotype. In the lectotype, what happens is the specimen selected from original material when there is no holotype. So when there is no prototype or a prototype specimen, original specimen which is there, right? So that can be used for the nomenclature when there is an absence of holotype specimens. So these are all the different specifications or different requirements that we need for the nomenclature. It's not that we go into the wild and we pick one plant and yeah, this is this plant, I will name it as Vamsy species or whatever. So we can't just do like that. So we have to follow certain rules, and we have to follow certain code or certain specifications provided by this ICBM. So now, in absence of this holotype, you know what to do. In presence of holotype, we can go for this paratyping, or we can go for lectotyping when there is no holotype. It means when there is no prototype specimen, we can use this actual original specimen, right? Which original specimen selected from the the specimen which is selected from the original material can be used when there is no holotype of specimens. And then the next one is neotype. So neotype is something which is a new nomenclature type when the holotype is not available. Again, when there is a no prototype specimen, what are the different approaches? We can go for syntype, we can go for lectotype, or we can go for neotype. When holotype is available, we can go for paratype. And the next one is isotype, that is, it is the same as holotype. It means within the holotype, so the same as holotype in the sense like we can use this prototype specimens. So when there is a holotype, we can go with the paratype or paratype or neotype or isotype. In absence of holotype specimens, we can go for syntype or lectotype. So this is how the specifications in nomenclature are there, which are not much covered in your NCERT. So make use of this video. I hope this is clear. In one of our NEET classes, I explained this for our NEET batch, 11th standard students. When they asked doubts in this from the NEET book, so we had a discussion on this holotype, isotype, right? So I hope you understood well. So let's move to the next aspect, right? So is it clear, guys? Whoever listening, so please do leave your feedback in comment section. Okay, let's move to the next aspect, that is taxonomy. When we talk about taxonomy, it deals with the principles and procedures of the identification, right? So we have got different branches of taxonomy, right? So this taxonomy deals with the principles and procedures of identification, nomenclature, and classification of organisms. We identify them, we name it, and we classify it, right? So it provides the detailed and external and internal structure, cellular structure, and ecological information of the organisms. So where exactly they are located, or what is their habitat, or even what type of nutrition they follow, what type of chemical they produce, right? What type of morphology they may get, right? So these are all aspects can be used in this taxonomy, can be studied by taxonomy, and we have several different branches. For example, if you see taxonomic field like alpha taxonomy, which talks about the morphological traits, it based upon the external appearances, based upon the morphological traits. Artificial taxonomy talks about the habit and habitat of an organism. Based upon habit and habitat, we can classify. And natural taxonomy talks about the natural similarities among the organism. From organism A to organism B, what are the similarities? We can get it. And then next one is chemotaxonomy, this taxonomy is based upon the synthesis or presence of an chemical, or absence of chemical, or production of that chemical in the cells or the tissues. And the next one is cytotaxonomy, which talks about the cytological studies. And then next, numerical or phonetic taxonomy, taxonomy which talks about the number of shared characters of varied. For example, like a pie chart, we can have it. In the sense, this species A, species B has shared similarities. So, likewise, organism A, organism B has shared similarities. In that way, we can actually classify. And the next one is phylogenetic or omega taxonomy. So first one is alpha, and then other one is omega. Omega taxonomy or phylogenetic taxonomy, which is this taxonomy is based upon the phylogenetic relationship. It means back in time how they are connected, and from how they have evolved, from which species to which species they have evolved. This entire history of this evolution we will talk about in phylogenetic studies, how they modified, how they adapted, etc. And next comes the classical taxonomy. So when we talk about classical taxonomy, it is something which is an old method, right? So in the classical taxonomy, the species is a basic unit, and it can be described on the basis of one or few preserved specimens, right? So in this classical taxonomy, the species or the organisms are classified on the basis of limited features. But when it comes to modern taxonomy or new systematics, right? Huxley, Huxley is the one who actually developed this concept of modern taxonomy, right? I'll be typing this. You can see here, Huxley. So these are the topics which are not covered in NCERT, guys. So please do follow. Julian Huxley, who actually talked about or who developed this concept of modern taxonomy or new systematics, right? So in these studies, what we can, it's a game changer. It's a game changer in the sense it is a dynamic and this classification is always a dynamic thing. So once we classified 100, 200 years before, and the same old classification, we can't use it. So the modern taxonomy or new systematics, concept developed by Julian Huxley. So he says that this classification or taxonomy is something, species or dynamic and ever-changing entity, right? So studies of the organisms are done on a huge number of variations. So we consider many variations, like what do we consider is cytotaxonomy, numerical taxonomy, chemotaxonomy. What are the different? Just now I told, right, what are the numerical taxonomy, chemotaxonomy, cytotaxonomy. Based upon this numerous factors, we will classify organisms. Right. So now comes to the taxonomic characteristics. So taxonomic categories. When we talk about taxonomic categories, these are all different taxa we use, right? And we have taxonomic characters which are always used in hierarchical classification of organisms. Right? There is an hierarchy from one taxa to other taxon, so that makes it obligate categories as well. So actually, this arrangement, the category is a part of overall taxonomic arrangement, right? So when we talk about the classification, it's not just a single step; it is a multiple step, and it will consist different categories. That makes it taxonomic categories. So this taxonomic categories, right, which uses this hierarchical classification hierarchy, right, from lower to higher to or higher to lower hierarchy. So they are called as obligate categories, and the subcategories like subspecies, subclass, subfamily, etc., which facilitate more scientific and sound placement of various taxa. So when we classify organism, when we go in-depth analysis of subspecies and subfamilies, it gives more broader what is a understanding of the taxa, right? These type of categories we name it as intermediate categories. So the one which follows a hierarchical system we call it as obligate categories, and the one which follows having one which the one the taxonomy which follows this sub classification, subfamily, subspecies, etc., we call it as intermediate categories, right? So we can arrange all these categories in a descending order, right, during the classification, and that is given this type of arrangement we call it as taxonomic hierarchy. It was first introduced by again Linnaeus, right, and it is otherwise called as Linnean hierarchy. So in this Linnean hierarchy, so these taxonomic characters are of we can separately study as for plants and for animals. So starts the arrangement when we talk about descending order, right? These categories from plants and animals, the variation comes at the division level or phylum level. In the case of after the class, in the case of animals we use a taxa phylum, but in the case of plants we use division. So when we talk about the taxon represents the rank of each category and refer to a unit of classification, taxon. So the term, if you see this term taxon was introduced, right? It's actually introduced by ICBM. So this is International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. They introduced this taxon. So each taxon has got its own definition, and you have to know which is the highest taxon and which is the basic unit, etc. You need to know. So in this we can study the kingdom, phylum or division, class, order, family, genus and species level. So kingdom is which is an highest category in the taxon, in which the kingdom includes all organisms which share a set of distinguished traits or characteristics. For example, kingdom Animalia, kingdom Plantae, right? Kingdom we have 5 kingdom classification also. Monirans, right? Protista, plants, Plantae, Animalia, right? So we have different types of 5 kingdom that biological classification we will deal in the second chapter, maybe tomorrow. Okay. So when we talk about phylum or division, it is a taxonomic category where the higher than the class. So there is a class over here and kingdom is there. So higher than the class, but lower than the rank kingdom. That's what we place in an intermediate. So when we talk about animals, we call them as phylum. When we talk about plant classification, we use the term division. So similar classes would be put together in the phylum or division. Likewise, class, similar or related orders would be kept in one class. So similar families put together in an order. So similar genuses would come into family. So this, they share certain features. They will have some common features or correlated features will be there. So they are separable from genera of a related family by important differences in based upon different characteristics. So from family to family, there would be a differences, but within the family, right, within the order, a few the families the which are closely related would be kept in the order, like that genuses and then species. So it is a, when we talk about the species, right, it is a lowest or a basic taxonomic character. So it contains one or more individuals of a population. So that makes its classification, taxonomy, taxonomical arrangement, etc. And the next one is, and the last aspect of this lesson is taxonomical aids. So based upon what actually what techniques that we can really classify or identify. So what are those? So they include techniques or procedures, or we used to store some information. For example, if I want to study about osmium sanctum, now it is available here. But or few plant types, they will be stored at the information centers in as in fresh specimens or dried specimens or etc. or herbarium. So we can take those stored information, we can really use it for identification and classification of organisms. So in NCERT they have given few taxonomical aids, right? What are those? Those are herbarium, manuals or catalogs. So in the catalog means based upon that which provides information for identification of names of species found in an area. Just like catalogs we see in some business catalogs, some purchasing catalogs, right? So in particular section we found all the related shampoos or related biscuit packets or whatever, so or oil, whatever. So likewise in that area, what are the different species we can find? That's how we can manual arrangement or catalogs we can find. So we can use herbarium, manuals or catalogs, or monographs, botanical and geological parks, keys and museums. So each one I'll try to discuss right now, and we will complete this lesson. So when we talk about this herbarium, right, this herbarium is a storehouse of collected plant specimens. So we try to do this herbarium, right? In my UG undergraduation, we used to do this collection of herbarium, right? Collection of different plant species, and press it and dry it and press it, and then make it as a herbarium sheet and write the description of it, etc. So this is a, and then we will store it in the department of botany department within that college. So that's how we practice. Like that, we can store. Herbarium is something which is a storehouse of collected plant specimens that are preserved on the sheets. So this is how we can actually use herbarium, and we can access those herbariums with the proper preservation. We can access for the later studies. Next one is manuals. I already told that manuals and catalogs are nothing but arrangement or the collection or the information of a species present in particular area. And then monographs contains the information on any one taxon, any one type, maybe a species, maybe genus, or maybe families. So that monographs, if we access that family, okay, these are the belonging or species in that particular family or particular species or particular genus, like that. And then coming to the botanical and geological parks, so contain which living collection of plants and animals in which in the conditions similar to their natural habitat. So we simulate or we provide the better natural conditions, right? When we talk about biodiversity conservation, we use ex situ methods and in situ methods. Like we use this wherever the plants or organisms or which are prone to vulnerability or extinction or endangered, we try to protect them, right? So here we are using botanical or geological parks, or they are living collection of these different organisms, right? So that we can really use it for the identification, at the same time classification. Next, keys. I already told that keys in the beginning of the class. So keys are used to identify, or keys are used for identification of plants and animals based on their similarities and dissimilarities. So we prepare a chart of similarities and dissimilarities, and we'll try to find out. So within the species, if we can get an alternative characteristics which are similar or dissimilar, based on that keys, we can match. We can see the percentage similarity, right? So when it comes to molecular biology, right, we use this blast search and different bioinformatic tools to really check the genome comparison. So we will be comparing the gene sequence with the available data, and we will see sequence similarities. So with one species, existing species, or how much similarity is there? If it is 85% or 85% above the 85 to 90%, that those are not novel species. If there are no similars, no there are no much similarities, that we can actually name that as a new identified species or strain or variety. So like that, in the molecular biology, we use sort of different bioinformatic tools as well. Finally, the museums. Museums are where the places of collection of represented, the preserved plants and animal specimens. Maybe that's how we preserve in the museums. If you go to any museum, you can even use organism as an taxonomical aids. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 taxonomical aids: herbarium, manuals and catalogs, monographs, botanical and zoological parks, keys, and then finally museums. So these are the taxonomical aids which helps in identification and classification of organisms. So what is the importance of taxonomic aids? With this, we will close this lesson. The importance is that it aids help to store and preserve the information as well as the specimen, right? So these are all aids that what we are using really helps in storage of the information, whether in living condition or specimen condition. So this is and it helps in systematic approach of classification and naming as well. So I hope this lesson you guys you can utilize for your NEET preparation as well as for your academic preparation, and the one whoever having this 11th standard people can botany, right? So they can really use this video for better understanding. And this is a second type of video, that is brief discussion on the chapter. More than this, I don't think this lesson has more to cover, but I will see that if I can take topic wise this lesson, and if I will try to see the content would be differing from this video, and I will put some extra examples, and as well as some sort of different approach. I will try to put it in detailed discussion of this chapter. I hope you guys use this video, and you can share this to 11th standard students of any sort of board. They can use these concepts to better understand. And please share to your friends. Subscribe before you leave, and like as well. So even I have building a website, www.super6education.com, right? So where you can write articles of different different subjects, or different based on your interest, so that I can post that. I can provide a platform. As well. So try to visit website as well. So we'll see you in the next video, right? Tomorrow we'll have the biological classification. This is second type of video, and please make sure that you go and click check the outline of this lesson, the morning session lesson. Thank you guys for coming live and interacting with me. See you in the next video. Stay at home and stay safe. Thank you guys.